So UFC 314 for me personally is very interesting because I love both fighters that are in the main event. I love Diego Lopes and I love Alexander Volkanovski. Alexander the Great Volkanovski, the former featherweight champion in the UFC, who was defeated by Ilia Topuria. He reigned for a very long time. He was a dominant champion. He will definitely go down in UFC history as one of the best featherweights of all time, unquestionably. Unfortunately, he's older, he's slower, and he has a lot of problems. And we are going to get into that in depth here as we break down UFC 314's main event, which will take place on April 12th, this Saturday, April 12th, at the Casilla Center in Miami, Florida. And of course, a great co-main event, of course, also with Paddy Pimblett versus Michael Chandler, and another fight that I'm looking forward to indeed. But right now, we're talking about Diego Lopes versus Alexander Volkanovski for the vacated title belt, of which Ilia Topuria was stripped. Don't get it twisted. He was stripped of his belt because he claimed an injury for right before his last fight. There he was supposed to defend his belt and he didn't, and he was stripped by Dana White, and now he's moving up a weight class because he thinks he's going to go defeat Islam Makhachev. Well, he's going to get his ass kicked, and I would love to see that fight because there's no way in hell Topuria has the skill level to even remotely match a guy like Islam. He will go down very fast against Islam Makhachev. But I digress. UFC 314, Diego Lopes from Brazil, 30 years old, 26-6, 10 knockouts, 12 submissions, 4 decision victories, and he has incredible jiu-jitsu and striking versus the former featherweight champion Alexander the Great Volkanovski, 26-4, 36 years old, 145 pounds, 5'6", and you're talking, he always has a height disadvantage because Diego Lopes is about 6 feet, he's 5'11", and it doesn't seem to matter because Volkanovski has always done great against people that are super tall because he doesn't really care. He knows how to fight. He's a great fighter. But let's get into the breakdown right now. When you look at Alexander Volkanovski, he completely changed after getting a head kick knockout the second time he fought Islam Makhachev, and it's obvious that he suffered some severe brain damage. I mean, the guy definitely has CTE. It was obvious in the Ilia Topuria fight. I mean, he wasn't as mobile, as creative as he normally is. And by the way, it had nothing to do with Topuria overwhelming him, you idiots, because go back and watch the fight. Volkanovski won the first round. The problem came in the second round where he froze up. And I always thought that was very odd. And I think his brain just shut off. And I've been saying that for months after he got knocked out by Ilia Topuria. I said, I think Volkanovski has CTE. I think he has brain damage. Now, guess what? He admitted during the most recent UFC breakdown for UFC 314, during the last week of his prep for UFC 314, he said, quote, his mind knew what to do, but his body wasn't listening during his fight with Ilia Topuria. That is a quote, and that is a clear sign of brain damage. I mean, skill-wise, he has every single tool that the perfect UFC champion requires, but mentally, he's just slowly deteriorating. And he will lose to Diego Lopes by knockout. And this is how it's going to happen. When you look at Diego Lopes's game, he has very, very hard leg kicks. He puts everything into it. I mean, all strikes are thrown with evil intentions. Never mind bad intentions. He has evil intentions. He wants to destroy his opponent. He puts his entire body into every single shot. Look at the leg kicks. Look at his striking. He wants to kill the guy. He wants to break a jaw. He wants to damage this guy, all right? By the way, he has very, very tight, classic Gracie jiu-jitsu with perfect execution until he gets to the submission point. And that's his one flaw. When he attempts submissions, he leaves way too much space between him and his opponent. And he uses way too much strength instead of leverage to attempt to finish his opponent. And eventually he does get it, but that didn't happen against Dan Ige. But I'll talk about Ige's fight in a second because that was very interesting. Never mind Brian Ortega. I mean, Brian Ortega was already done, so he did great against him after Ige. But Diego Lopes can take massive amounts of punishment and still continue to fight. Now, he does have a couple of outstanding flaws that need to be addressed, and again, I don't hear anyone talk about this ever. He has a very high guard, and he's wide open for body shots. Volkanovski can easily exploit this if he plays a smart game. Diego Lopes seems to fade after round 2. This was obvious during the Dan Ige fight. Dan Ige pretty much kicked the shit out of him in round 3. Yes, a unanimous decision because he won rounds 1 and 2, but Ige really came back at the end. And why? Because Diego Lopes's tank was completely emptied. Now, Volkanovski should take his time and try to frustrate Diego Lopes for the first 3 rounds and use his experience and cardio to his advantage. Now, how is Diego Lopes going to beat Alexander Volkanovski? Very easily, by just playing his usual game. He doesn't have to change anything. He needs to throw those hard, forceful leg kicks like he does in every single fight. He needs to throw those devastating, brutal head combos like he does in every single fight. He doesn't have to take Volkanovski down because he has the power to knock him out. That's it. That's really all all Diego Lopes has to do. And if Volkanovski is crazy enough to take down Diego Lopes, this isn't going to be hard for Diego to get a submission. And Volkanovski will tap. He will not allow himself to pass out because he has way too much pride to do that. Can Volkanovski win? Even with the brain damage, even with the apparent CTE, and even with freezing in the second round against Elito Portia? Yes, he can win. This is how Alexander Volkanovski can win this fight against Diego Lopes. He's going to have to change everything. He's going to have a 5-round strategy to beat this guy. All right. Here's exactly what he has to do. All right. He has to stall and he has to frustrate Diego Lopes for the first 2 rounds. The crowd's going to boo. The talkers on the mic are going to talk a lot of shit, but there's no other way for him to beat Lopes unless he drags him into the deep waters, into the later rounds, and takes advantage of it. And he needs to just not pay attention to the crowd. He needs to not pay attention to the ref when he says, come on, give me some action. Just ignore the guy. I mean, they're not going to stop the fight. He's a veteran. He's a former champion. He's a respected champion. He's one of the legends in the UFC. It doesn't matter if he breaks some of the rules for the first 2 rounds or stalls a little bit. They're going to let him do it. And he needs to do this for the first 2 rounds. He needs to avoid Diego Lopes. He needs to frustrate Diego Lopes. He needs to get out of the way of those fucking low leg kicks. And he has to just stand on his feet. That's it. Now, we get to round 3. This is where Volkanovski needs to unleash the classic Volkanovski. He needs to throw those creative combos where he's like, throws a couple of strikes, he ducks down, covers his head, and then he throws a head kick. He waits a split second, which is a perfect setup for a body shot. He needs to use his strength and ferocity to his advantage. In round 4, he needs to do exactly what he did in round 1 and round 2. Pace himself. Avoid getting taken down. Frustrate Diego Lopes. Avoid the strikes. And at this point in round 4, Diego's going to be a little bit winded. And he's going to be frustrated also. And he might be susceptible to a couple of strikes, but it's not going to be enough to take Diego Lopes out. It will go to round 5. And in round 5, Volkanovski is going to have to attempt to knock out Diego Lopes. Now, Volkanovski's definitely going to take a ton of damage, but it's going to be from a weaker, depleted Diego Lopes. And Lopes is not going to have the punching power to put Volkanovski on his ass. So the most Volkanovski can do here is just empty the tank, not care about what the outcome is. If he gets knocked out, he gets knocked out. I mean, whatever. We went to round 5. We're going to see a great fight. The fans will be happy. I'll be happy. You'll be happy. No one can talk shit. Diego Lopes is going to give him a ton of respect. And like I said, he needs to attempt to knock out Diego Lopes. I don't think he will. But I think that if he plays this game, stalls the first 2 rounds, unleashes the classic Volk for round 3, stalls in round 4, and just attempts to knock out in round 5, he will get the decision victory. There is no other way for Alexander Volkanovski to beat Diego Lopes other than this game plan, period. My real prediction for UFC 314, Diego Lopes versus Alexander Volkanovski, is that Diego Lopes will defeat Alexander Volkanovski in round 2 by a knockout, and he will become the new UFC featherweight champion.